This is Frank Islam, Chairman and CEO of FI Investment Group and your host of Washington Calling, where we interview leading voices from business and politics that impact you, the viewer. Today, we are fortunate to have a guest, a distinguished guest, and his name is Sugeeswara Senadhira. I may not pronounce it correctly. If I did not, I apologize for that. He's the media advisor to the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. He also served as the Director of the International Media and Research at the Presidential Secretariat of Sri Lanka. Sir, welcome to our show. Thank you for coming, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for your introduction. And just call me Sugi, that's fine.
Sugi. Okay, I will try to do a better job of pronouncing your name correctly. I'm American, I lived all my life here, so it's very difficult for me to understand it. So anyway, you had a very distinguished career as a veteran journalist. You also served as an international media director for 3 presidents and a graduate of the University of Cambridge in England, which is a wonderful institution. My wife is on the board of Oxford University. Would you be kind enough to tell our global audience a little bit about who you are yourself and what has been your accomplishments?
I wouldn't like to go into my accomplishments. I started as, the external broadcast with the All India Radio's External Services Division in New Delhi, immediately after my studies. So external broadcast was on, the enhancing image of India abroad. So India was my second country. So I spent 25 long years in India. So altogether in different periods. So it was not difficult for me to do the job. Subsequently, I joined the Sri Lankan newspapers and also worked for several organizations, including I was Newsweek's Colombo correspondent in addition to, later on I joined IANS, India Abroad News Service, based in India. Then finally, I joined the Foreign Service because the former Foreign Minister Lakshman Kadiragama started a new scheme to recruit communication persons as middle-level diplomats. And I sat for the written exam at this age, and at that age, I mean, and 3 interviews and so on. So I was selected. In fact, I topped the list I'm proud to say that in that examination. So after that, I served in different places, New Delhi, Oslo, France, Paris. So after that, I joined the Presidential Secretariat in 2013 and continued until the last November, the fall of the presidency, Gotabaya Rajapaksa's tenure. Until then, I was there. Then immediately after that, I joined the Prime Minister, whom I knew for quite some time, as his media advisor.
So as I understand, you're a journalist, but now you are working in the Prime Minister's office. So my question to you is, how have you adjusted to the changes of your assignment and your job? But before you answer my question, do you believe that the media in Sri Lanka is free and also make sure it's not controlled by the government? And there's a freedom of press, which is the main part of the democracy: freedom of faith, freedom of religion, freedom of press. Do you think it exists in Sri Lanka as well?
Well, I'll answer the first one first, because joining from the private media, because I was also the head of the news section of the first private news service in Sri Lanka. And we didn't have much of a competition because until then the state media dominated the news scenario. So after working for the private sector, I found that, well, there are limitations everywhere. In press freedom is nothing absolute. There's nothing called absolute press freedom. because I remember even BBC with all that independence, they had to ban the voice of Jerry Adams when he was in IRA. BBC didn't telecast or voicecast his views. So similarly, when I joined a private newspaper run by the entrepreneur, I knew that I just asked him the limitations of this, and I told him that I need absolute freedom, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to reveal if there's some news about your business associates or some corruption deal or attempt to avoid custom duties or something. I will not telecast, but when it comes to other things, I need absolute freedom. With that guarantee, I could work there. Even in the government, it is a part of the entire communication the networks. You see, when it is mass communication, whether you work for government or private organization, there are certain limitations, and within those limitations, you can do certain things. Now, I do write to newspapers in addition to what I do for the issuing press releases and trying to enhance the profile of the government and the Prime Minister. In addition to that, I do write newspaper columns. In those, I have that escape line. You see, these are my personal views, and not. So, with that, I think you can do within those limitations. You can do something, as a media person.
So let me go back to another question for you. So there's a freedom of press, freedom of faith, freedom of religion, and those are the cornerstone of a democracy. It does exist in Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka, unfortunately, there are the certain limitations.
Okay.
We did have a vibrant press, you see, in the first 2 decades after independence.
Yes.
Press was absolutely free until the early 70s. Then the government took over the biggest newspaper group, ANC, Associate Newspapers of Sri Lanka, which published all the premier largest circulated newspapers, and it was taken over by the government in 1973.
Okay.
So after that, the collapse started, deterioration in media freedom started. Subsequent government, when J.R. Jayawardena came to power, he took the other newspaper group in addition to what the Lake House group, the ANCL group. He took over the Times of India group, Times of Sri Lanka group.
Okay. So let me shift my gear and talk to you a little bit about working with the Dinesh Gunawardena. I may not have pronounced it correctly, the 15th Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. Can you shed some bright lights on the separations of power between the President, Prime Minister, and the President? As you know, this Prime Minister has been in politics for many, many years, and he has served as a minister for several cabinet jobs he had, and he's also a good friend of the President of Sri Lanka. And how do you go about separating the power between the two?
Well, Sri Lanka, we have an executive presidency. And the Prime Minister is only the senior most minister, one could say. In fact, the first Prime Minister of Sri Lanka under the executive presidency, Ranasinghe Premadasa, said, Prime Minister's job is a peon's job. But in his work, he proved it's different. He was entrusted the Ministry of Housing and Construction. With his 100,000 new house building programs, he became extremely popular in the country. And he became the second president of Sri Lanka. He was elected second. Similarly, Mahinda Rajapaksa started as a prime minister, then under the presidency of Chandrika Kumaratunga Bandaranaike, and he became the president, and twice he got elected. So, although the executive president has almost absolute powers, Prime Minister could do certain things within his now. In addition to the Prime Minister's portfolio, he has been entrusted with the local government, home affairs, and also provincial councils. Those three important ministries, public administration too. So public administration covers the entire island. The bureaucracy comes under the Prime Minister. So he recently started this grow food for self-sufficiency and exports. Under that theme, he started this new program and implemented in 14,000 district divisions. All the district heads of bureaucracy are under the Prime Minister's ministry. So he implements it all over the country. That shows that Prime Minister can do something. And furthermore, you asked about the Prime Minister, Dinesh Gunawardena. He is from a political family. His father, in fact, Philip Gunawardena, father of Marxism, Socialism in Sri Lanka. He studied in London, joined socialist movement, then joined the Spanish civil rights movement and fought against the regime there. And then finally he came, and when he was arrested in Sri Lanka, he escaped to India and joined the Indian freedom struggle with Jayaprakash Narayan and others.
So and he also went to University of Oregon in the United States.
Beg your pardon?
He went to the University of Oregon in the United States.
That's right, yes. Yes.
So I would, with all due respect to you, and I have enormous respect for you and for your country and for the Prime Minister, but I want to ask you a question with due respect to you. How do you describe the situation in Sri Lanka now after a year of economic and political turmoil? They're feeling there's an impression that your country has unprecedented political turmoil and also the collapse of the economy. Do you think Sri Lanka will come out of this present crisis stronger and better? Do you think how the Sri Lanka is coping with the turmoil, with this situation, economic and political crisis?
It is, as you said, rightly said, unprecedented crisis. It started with the COVID-19 pandemic, and it has hit Sri Lanka very hard in several ways. In addition to the drop in tourism arrival, that is one of our major foreign exchange incomes. Right. Then also the large number of Sri Lankans living abroad and had to return. They lost their jobs and they returned to Sri Lanka. The government had to look after them. In addition to, furthermore, Sri Lanka lost the revenue, the remittances from abroad from the expatriate Sri Lankans. So with that, that was the main problem. That's why our foreign exchange reserves dropped to almost zero level in 2 years. And then we, in addition to the pandemic and aftermath, then the global recession started. And Ukraine, Russian war. All these have culminated effect of all these factors was that we ran into a most difficult economic situation, and we had to get debt-free structuring and moratoriums on debt repayment. And with all the, fortunately, our friends came to assist. The first country was India, the biggest neighbor. They gave us $4 million US immediately, in addition to a moratorium on debt repayment. Then China too came forward, our largest lender. They account for nearly 12% of the total loans we have taken. That is from the overall. Mostly we have taken loans from the International Monetary Fund, IMF, World Bank, and Asian Development Fund. When it comes to the countries, China heads the list, then comes Japan, then India.
So can you tell us a little bit about the long-term and lasting impacts of the pandemic on the tourism during the COVID. And is tourism picking up now? Do you think the new prime minister will boost the economy and turn it around? And also, as you know, Sri Lanka has a lot of popular destinations for the tourists. What are the tourist attraction in Sri Lanka? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, we have several. You see, ours is, as you know, the small island, but we have beautiful beaches, and within 4 hours you can reach the hill country, the scenic beauty, the mountains, waterfalls, the greenery. Furthermore, we have the ancient capital Anuradhapura and Polonnaruwa, the Sugeeswara rock paintings, all this are in the central part of the country. So there's so many things to do for tourists here, and you see, we had a very good year in tourism was flourishing, and in 2018 we reached the figure 2.3 million. That was quite a good, but then pandemic brought it down to 50,000, and the following year it was less than that. But for the last 6 months, we attracted nearly 400,000 tourists. Altogether, last year, 730,000 tourists have come.
Very nice.
So
they come from all over the world. They come from.
That's right, mostly from India, but the Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Russia.
And what about the United States?
United States, very few. We get about 10,000 or 15,000.
Well, I'd love to go there to your country. I've never been there. Your country is famous for its tea, which has a very unique and distinct flavor. What is the government is doing, your new government is doing to help the revival of the tea industry? As we understand, the tea industry is going through revival, with the new plant being established and also the old being revitalized. My question to you is, what is the long-term future of the tea industry? And do you think it's going to be dependent on innovations and adaptability? And by the way, as I understand, it's a Scottish planter who established the first commercial tea plantation in 1867.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
That's right. The Taylor, his name was Taylor.
Yes.
Taylor made tea.
Yes.
Sri Lankan tea, we had a major difficulty last 3 years because we banned chemical fertilizer. Glyphosate is essential for tea industry. Insecticides, those were banned during the Gotabaya Rajapaksa government. And with that, tea production dropped to about 50%. So that's a huge drop. But the government has taken several steps to reintroduce, allow fertilizer imports once again. And also to develop new, the last 10 years, we have neglected the tea industry to some extent, and large areas of tea estates were abandoned. So the government has instructed and gave them subsidies for growth in those areas, and also given them certain fertilizers and other required inputs from the government to ensure the growth in those areas also. So with that, and in between, they were also allowed to grow certain other plants in those areas between the tea plants, for example, eucalyptus trees for paper industry. So with that, the income of tea estates would go up within, it will take about 5 years for them. But within this period, there are strong measures to revive the tea industry. And we do earnestly hope that it will happen.
Well, the tea from Sri Lanka has a very unique flavor. and it's very distinct flavor, and it's supposed to be very good. So you need to revive the industry to make sure the new government is working on it. You said they are doing that. I wanted to shift your gear and talk about the Sri Lanka, as you mentioned, and during our conversation. The Sri Lanka has a large diaspora community in North America and all over the world. What have they done, and what more can they do to help and support Sri Lanka? Do you think the diaspora can help and to achieve its fullest potential of Sri Lanka in the area of healthcare, innovation, and also education, skills development, creating jobs, creating new companies? Do you think they can do that? If so, what is your plan to make sure that you can tap upon those resources?
Of course, government has launched a program to attract investments from the diaspora, Sri Lankan diaspora, and President invited a group of them for talks recently, and they met the Prime Minister also. People from US, the UK, France, Canada, and several other countries, and also from the West Asia. And Japan and South Korea. All these diaspora groups there, and unfortunately, what happened was during the last 3 decades of conflict, the diaspora did not want to help the government in any way. Yeah. They were not sure whether the government would solve the problems of the minorities. But since the government has taken several steps after the end of the war, 2009, after the end of the conflict, government has opened a reparation committee, then missing persons committee, then the lands committee, and the lands taken over by the military from the individuals for security reasons during the military onslaught. So all these were returned to the original owners. That problem has been solved. Of the detainees, the government has released 16,000 of them. Only less than 300 of them are still held because there are certain court cases again. The judiciary process has to be completed before they are released. So those steps were highly appreciated by the diaspora groups, and they are ready to invest now, especially in the north and east. There will be, we expect a tremendous boost in investments from diaspora in the next few years. Especially in fisheries and agriculture sectors and hotel industry. Hospitality industry, they are very keen because some diaspora groups have already opened hotels in the north and east, the coastal belt, and new areas have been developed as tourist attractions. So with that, we expect a lot of diaspora involvements, but we have to set the issues at home first, to ensure that the total participation, because still the provincial council elections have not been held, and the provincial devolution of powers to the two provincial councils in the north and east are one of the conditions of the diaspora before investment. Those have been worked out.
Okay. So do you have anything to chime in before we close our conversation, sir?
Yeah, sure. I don't need time. I can continue, but if you...
Yeah, well, I thank you very much for your time and for taking the time to connect with us and also to engage us and to interview us. Thank you very much for your time. This is Frank Islam wishing you a great week. Thank you for watching.